Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Ego Chall Podcast, a Call of Duty esports podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we are going to be discussing another roster change in the Call of Duty League. We're also going to be discussing and previewing the first major of the CDL season. We have a double elimination tournament coming up this week. We also have some academy teams, some challenger teams that have been announced by some current CDL organizations. Maybe we'll look a little bit ahead to tomorrow or today if you're listening on Wednesday. The second CDL Community update is scheduled for Wednesday, so we'll be talking about that, hopefully, if we can get to it within the hour. But before that, how are you doing, Bink?
I'm doing all right. Like you said, we got our first big tourney of the year coming up 2 days, less
Mhm.
than 48 hours from now. So I'm just ready to hop right in and get back to seeing some COD land. That's actually, we saw the kickoff classic, but really our first shot of meaningful Vanguard action on land. So excited to talk about it and get into it.
Let's start off with this roster change stuff before we get into the actual tournament. One of the 12 teams that will be competing in this tournament is the Paris Legion. We talk a lot about Paris despite their poor record. They are currently 0-5, the only winless team this season in the CDL. Obviously, they're not doing too hot, so they decided to make a roster change on February 23rd, I believe. I have it pulled up. February 23rd, our very own Dottie Sports Crone, he reported that the Paris Legion were pursuing Gravity and Jimbo to replace Decimate and Fellow on the Paris Legion CDL roster. It didn't end up being exactly how Crone initially reported it. He said a few days later that he had heard that Gravity was still set to come onto the roster, but that Jimbo was not, and that Fellow would stay on the Paris Legion's roster. And yesterday, February 28th, the Paris Legion officially released Decimate from their roster. And today, they officially announced that Gravity had signed and he would be competing at the first major of the season. Let's get your thoughts on this, Bink, because this is the second roster change of the season. The first being the New York Subliners switching out Neptune and bringing in Royalty. So, what do you think about the Paris Legion making this move?
Yeah, I don't think a one person change here necessarily, you know. Ah, excuse me. I don't think it immediately makes them a contender, or the Paris is winning champs crew might not necessarily be on that train of thought right now just after this one particular move. But I am really excited for Gravity. Um, he's been fighting his way through the challengers pit for a while now, and uh, most notably he was a part of that Western team that saw uh, success early last year, and he was playing with Paul X, Zaptius, and Venom, and all three of them got picked up by CDL teams last year at certain points in the season. And Gravity was the only player not to be picked up from that team last year, and that was a discussion last year during the year. And I think the main factor involved in that is just that Gravity's a main AR player, and there's usually only one main AR on each team, which means there's usually only 12 main AR spots in the entire league. So it's a harder position to A, have an opening for, and B, actually fill. So as opposed to, like an SMG, like if you're a fast SMG player, like you can usually find your way on a team much easier than, a main AR. So I think that played a role in it, but now he's finally getting his shot, so I'm excited to see what he can do. He's like we said, he's seen success in challengers, and now he's getting his shot in the big leagues. So congrats to him. I don't think necessarily this one change just all of a sudden makes Paris like a super threat or anything like that, but who knows? Maybe they'll enter a little bit of a honeymoon phase, be able to go on and run at the major. Not sure, but excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree with you. I'm not sure if this is a move that really does a whole lot for Paris in terms of like a win-loss result, but I'm happy that they're doing something to try to resolve some of the issues that they've experienced so far in the season. They're winless. They've lost all 5 of their matches, and depending on how they perform this weekend, they could lose their first 6 consecutive matches, and um, you know, really not even get a chance at playing on LAN other than. I mean, it's very possible that they'll play 3 maps on LAN before going online for another month or two. So this weekend at the major would be very important, and but we also know that they just don't have a lot of time to practice with Gravity, especially if he's got to come in from somewhere like he's traveling, and that obviously takes away from how much practice time they can have. So it'll be interesting to see what Paris or how Paris performs this week, and maybe this roster will stick together for the second set of qualifying matches as we get into the second major of the season. But yeah, happy that Paris is actually just addressing something and not just letting this roster go and you know stay at the bottom.
And yeah, I mean, we don't gotta dwell on it too much, but I don't think Desi was like necessarily the problem with the Paris team. One thing that I know I brought up a couple times when we were just talking about this roster in particular during the off season and before matches actually started, it was just like a question of roles, like who was going to be that main AR, just because with Desi and John, you assumed they were going to run the subs, so then it became a question of Fellow versus Temp for the main R, and neither of them had up until this point like actually been a main AR. They were both more flexes throughout their careers, and Fellow like assumed that role in the season, and obviously didn't the team didn't see the results right away. So now they're going to have an actual dedicated main AR, somebody who's done it and has seen success in the level below pro. So we'll although Dusty might not have been the problem, this could be something that allows Fellow to maybe feel more comfortable or something like that. I know Temp has been playing pretty well individually and statistically, so it shouldn't change anything for him, but we'll have to see who like predominantly runs that second sub alongside John. Um, and yeah, we'll just have to see. I think this is something that we're going to have to evaluate, like you said, beyond this one match, because Paris will play the loser of Optic versus Seattle, which either way you look at it, Seattle had their struggles the end of the last online qualifiers week, but they're still a really talented team and have shown, they can, you know, play well earlier this year, and Optic is Optic, so it could be a quick matchup, like you said, and we'll just have to see if we only get to see 3 maps of the new lineup. Um, we'll have to see if they make further changes or if they try to stick it out and go into the next set of online qualifiers for the Major 2 with the same squad and look to improve from there.
Yep. Let's get into this first major and let's go over the bracket because I'm sure that's what a lot of people want to hear from us and not spend too much of our time talking about the Paris Legion, even though Paris is indeed winning champs. We have a double elimination bracket this weekend, March 3rd through the 6th, starting on Thursday. We have 4 first round winners bracket matches and then 4 first round losers bracket matches. The way that this has been set up over the past 3 weeks, we've had dozens of matches taking place between the teams, and the top 8 teams after 5 qualifying matches. Those 8 teams start in the winners bracket, and the bottom 4 teams, the Paris Legion, they are one of those 4. They start in the losers bracket, and obviously start at a huge disadvantage considering they can't lose one match. They have to essentially win every single one of their matches if they want to become the first major champions. The major will be taking place, I believe, in Arlington, Texas. It'll be hosted by Optic Texas. So it should be a really fun event. It'll be the first event this season, other than like the Kickoff Classic, that fans will be able to attend. So just a really cool event. I hope that people stay safe and they have fun and cheer really loud for the teams, and we can get a ton of viewership for this event. So let's get right into the bracket. For some reason, it's cutting off the bottom team, which was the New York Subliners. But I put up the bracket on the screen if you're watching the YouTube or Spotify version or watching live. Let's start in the upper bracket. We have 4 matches. So the way this is going is that the first 4 winners bracket matches will be the only matches taking place on Thursday, and then Friday the losers bracket matches will be played, and then everything will kind of go from there. Let's start at the very top of the bracket. Atlanta FaZe, they are undefeated so far this season, 5-0 coming into this. They faced the Boston Breach in their first round match. We've been talking a lot about Atlanta FaZe basically since this podcast started more than a year ago. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going with Atlanta FaZe. I think that they'll advance to the second round. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah. Just in case you want to try a different bracket, I put a different tweet from the CDL with the same bracket. I don't know if you'll have the cutoff problem, but you can give that a shot. But yeah, like you said, going FaZe here. I don't think there's much we really have to talk about. Only undefeated team in the league right now. Boston has had moments this year where they look good. Still, as we've touched on multiple times with Boston now, it's, they were the last team to come into the league. They got some rookie players, stuff like that. So it's a tall task for them. It would be a massive upset if Boston were able to knock FaZe off here in the first round, but I'm going to go with FaZe. I'll say 3-1.
Yeah. I'll say 3-0. I don't think that Boston, I actually was looking at it before the stream, but Boston, their real best shot would be to win a control off of Atlanta, because that's statistically FaZe's worst game mode, but that's also Boston's worst game mode. They're like 1-5 in control. So it's just not a good a good matchup for them. Obviously Atlanta's just really good. So it does. I guess this doesn't matter. Both of these brackets are cutting off the bottom for some reason. I think it's just the way that the stream is set up. So I'll just stick with the second one that you sent me. So it's pulled up now. So we both have Atlanta moving on to the second round. They will play the winner of Optic Texas versus the Seattle Surge, which I think is, in my opinion, it's probably the most interesting winners bracket first round match, because I'm kind of interested to see how Seattle rebounds from a really poor final week of qualifying matches, and Optic has been doing pretty well since they started 0-2 in the first week. Who do you got between Optic and Surge?
Yeah, I think, FaZe and Boston is just, it's a 1 versus 8 matchup, so it's like, right away, it's not necessarily the most interesting, but I think all 3 other matches here in this winter bracket have some interesting storylines and stuff. I'm real excited for all the matches, obviously. But this one, like you said, this should be a good one. It is, Optics Major. The green wall will likely be out in full force in the stands. Probably very controversial, but I'm gonna go Surge 3-2 here. I don't know why, but I'm gonna go with the Surge despite their recent struggles online. They did look good early in the Kickoff Classic, which was on LAN, so I don't feel like that's a major worry. The other thing is just Optic as an organization historically has had slow starts to tournaments in the past. Now this is a very different roster with, especially with the Dallas Empire guys coming in. So it's a different roster than the ones that may have had some issues with slow starts to tourneys in the past. So I don't necessarily think that's a big factor here. Just something I felt like bringing up. But I could easily see Optic winning this match, especially if Seattle continues to struggle like they did in the last online qualifier matches. But I feel like that might be fuel to the fire for some of these teams, or for some of the guys on this Seattle team. And we saw what Agassi did last year against Optic. I don't know. I just, for some reason, I got a feeling Seattle is going to take this one, but I think it's going to be a good series either way. Could see Optic taking it very easily, but I'll go with Seattle.
I'm going to go with Optic. I think they pull out 3-2, but it's, like you said, a really interesting matchup that could go either way. If Seattle shows up at their best and playing how they were near the beginning of this, I want to say this is a stage, but at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of like the set of qualifying matches and in the kickoff classic, if Seattle shows up like that, I think it's going to be very difficult for Optic to win. But I don't know. I feel like Optic can with this specific roster. I think that they could go really far. I think that they're one of the best and most talented teams in the league. But and really there are two round 11s away from being 5-0 if you think about it, because they lost on round 11 against London and round 11 against Minnesota, I believe, in week 1. So, if both of those results get flipped, they're 5-0 and they're coming in with the same record as FaZe. So I think that Optic is the better team, and at their best, they are, obviously ahead of Seattle. It's just, will they show up? And I think that they will. So I'm going to go with Optic 3-2 over Seattle. So that would set up I was going to say that sets up a really obviously cool and historic matchup in second round.
Yeah.
Let's continue on with this winners bracket preview. We got the next match would be London Royal Ravens and the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Both of these teams have, it's been interesting to watch. London is overperforming totally from what we expected and what we've wrongly predicted for the past 3 or 4 weeks. And the Guerrillas have been a little up and down at times, but they got to the winners bracket, and that's the most important thing. Not starting in the losers bracket was the main goal for most of these teams, and they have a real good shot to do well at this tournament. I'm gonna go with London. I know I've only picked them maybe once. Maybe I haven't picked them at all, but I think that London has deserved the respect for me to pick them. I fully expect this to go the opposite way now that I picked against LAG and picked London, so I'm expecting that. But who do you got, Royal Ravens versus Guerrillas?
I'm going LAG. I'm pretty
God.
surprised you aren't. But yeah, London went 4-1 in the qualifiers, and their only loss was to LAG. Obviously, young London team. Haven't really seen much of them on LAN because all we saw was them at the Kickoff Classic, and they got 3-0'd by Seattle, I believe. So this will be like a little bit of redemption for them, trying to show some people what they can do on LAN. But just, based on recent history, especially for a team with someone like Slasher, who is, just so openly against online play and really prefers LAN play, if LAG were able to beat London online, I'm going to think they can do it on LAN too. So I'll go with LAG here. I've been picking against London the last couple weeks anyway, so I might as well keep it going.
Yeah, I'm sure that the London fans really love that you're picking against them because it's worked out so far. But I might have reverse Giga jinxed London here by picking them. So we'll see. The last match of the winners bracket for the first round is the Los Angeles Thieves versus the Toronto Ultra. This is a really interesting matchup because Toronto has not done very well over the past week or two. Cammy did miss that one match, I believe, in week 2, but even when he was in the lineup, they were struggling in week 3. The Thieves have looked really, really good so far this season, and are kind of a surprise to be tied for second. I think technically they might be the second seed, but second, third seed, it doesn't really matter all that much. But second best record in the league. only behind FaZe. So who do you got? Thieves versus Ultra. I'm still on the fence about who I should pick here.
I'm going with Toronto here. We're still early in the season, obviously, but we have seen this matchup twice now at this point. We saw it at the Kickoff Classic, where Toronto won 3-2. And then most recently, we saw it in the online matches where the Thieves won 3-1. But even though it was a 3-1 victory, Toronto's one map was a convincing 250 to 109 on Bokach Hardpoint. And then the last three maps that LA Thieves won were all on Tuscan, and it was 6-4 in the search, 3-2 in the control, and then 250 to 215 in the hardpoint. So those were pretty close maps. I don't have the individual scores for the Kickoff Classic, so I don't know for sure how close those maps were. I think there was like a super close Tuscan hardpoint, though, in the Kickoff Classic, if my memory serves me correctly. Or that might have been Thieves versus Optic that I'm thinking of. I don't remember. Regardless, we've seen these teams play a couple times now already, so they have repetitions. They have VOD to watch of themselves against these teams. So I'm expecting another super close series here. I think it goes 3-2, and I'm just going to lean Toronto here. Similar to, I guess this would be considered an upset at this point, just based off of like the seedings and whatnot. But similar to like that surge pick for me, like if Toronto comes out struggling like they have recently, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Thieves take this one. But something's just telling me to go with Toronto here, so that's what I'm gonna do.
It's hard to say what is an upset at a lot of times in
Yeah,
the CDL because these teams, their performances vary week to week, and you really don't know what kind of team is going to show up. I'm going to go with the Thieves. I feel just a little more confident in them right now. Like I feel like they've been a lot more consistent and steady than Toronto, but I also understand that Toronto is an incredible team and they've proved, for the last like season basically that they shouldn't be doubted most of the time. But I'm gonna go with the Thieves here. I just feel a little more confident in that pick than if I was gonna pick the Ultra. So I'm gonna say that LAT moves on to winners bracket round 2.
but I think that just speaks again. We've touched on it multiple times in our podcast this season. It's just this league is so competitive this year in particular, and like it shows like with these first round matchups, we feel like at least 3 of the 4 matchups could go either way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a testament to how competitive the league is and how strong all these teams have looked so far and at certain points. So I'm really excited for all these matchups.
A thing that also needs to just be noted is online, it throws some variance into these results, or maybe the emphasis on how big of a win it was, or whatever. You really don't know how much of an impact it makes on some of these matches. So it's also playing a factor into, like, Seattle, for example, did pretty well at the last 2 majors of the season last year when it was on LAN, whereas they look like garbage for most of the season before then. So maybe we'll see a team that looked pretty poor or didn't look like they were playing up to their potential come out and play really well at the LAN. It's always something to note.
And it's also worth noting. I mean, I know I brought it up when Optic started 0-2, but before the CDL made the change to include all 12 teams, if that change wasn't initiated, these like 4 matchups that we mentioned would be the only ones we would be seeing
That's
to
true.
kick off this tournament. And Florida, Paris, Minnesota, and New York wouldn't be competing this weekend at all if the CDL kept up with its initial format of only having 8 teams at each major. So although it does, as we mentioned, when we were talking about Paris, although it's not ideal to start in the losers bracket, it's better than not being there at all.
Yeah, of course. Let's get to these loser bracket matches. So, uh, like I previously stated, these 4 teams were the bottom 4 in the league, and as a result, they start in the losers bracket. All of these matches, the first round losers bracket matches, will take place on Friday, March 4th, and each of these 4 teams are essentially awaiting the results of the 4 matches on Thursdays. So Florida, since they're at the top, we'll start with them. They play the loser of Atlanta FaZe versus the Boston Breach. Both of us picked the Breach to lose that match. So Florida versus Boston. Who do you have winning there?
This is an interesting one, and I'm just gonna preface this first, for the sake of like our fans who keep up with our predictions and everything like that. I think the way we're gonna do this this year, just because we don't know the matchups for sure, and that can like throw off the prediction scores and whatnot. So I think the best way for us to do this is, if you don't already, follow us on Twitter at Ego Chall Podcast. Preston or myself, most likely Preston though, will tweet out like what our predictions are for the matchups once like they're actually set in stone, and then we'll keep track of how we did throughout the major, as opposed to like, I mean, there's a chance that one of us predicts all 4 matchups in the first round wrong, and then we would have all the matchups wrong in the losers bracket too, and it would just be chaos and mess with our predictions. So we're gonna try it out that way for this major, see how it goes, see if you guys like that. But now we got that out of the way. This is definitely an interesting one, assuming Atlanta beats Boston, just because I did see a clip. I think it was on YouTube of Skies was like just playing zombies, going for camos and talking about recent scrims results, and he said that they've been frying everybody but FaZe. So I found that a little interesting. Maybe Florida's like hitting their stride and figured something out. I don't really know. I'm not going to let that factor into my decision too much here. I'm going to go with Boston, but I think this could be one um, that's dependent on how we see Boston perform against FaZe. Like if we see them just like come out flat against FaZe, which I don't know, that could be tough to judge just because of how good FaZe have looked. But if Boston like gets 3-0 smoked, like maybe they're demoralized or something, and then Florida is able to capitalize on that and pull off a win. And there's also the chance that just Florida is really improved in scrims, like Skies was talking about in the clip I saw, and they still beat Boston regardless of their performance against FaZe. So should be an interesting one. I'm excited to see exactly what kind of performance we get out of Florida, but I'll go with Boston 3-2 here.
Yeah, without seeing how Boston performs against Atlanta, uh, because I guess if they put up a really hard fight against FaZe and nearly beat them, maybe my opinion changes. But I'm going to go with Florida. I think more highly of Florida than I do Boston right now. I don't think that there's a very large gap between Florida and Boston, despite the Breach starting in the upper bracket and the Mutineers starting in the lower bracket. There's not that big of a gap in skill as far as I'm concerned. And I just feel a little more confident in Florida. I think that the skill on Florida is superior at the higher level. Like I think that Skies and Big Wake are able to, and honestly, Florida as a whole, like I think that they can go really far. I think very highly of Vivid. I think he's awesome. Like the way he plays is like the way that I like seeing COD players play, the BZ style of just being an absolute crackhead running around the map. Like that's very entertaining to watch. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Florida here. But I think it'll be close. I don't think that there's a huge difference in skill between these two teams, like as a unit. And then next we have the loser of Optic Texas and the Seattle Surge against the slightly new look Paris Legion. This will be Gravity's first CDL match and might be his only match of the major, quite possibly. This is probably the worst outcome, like for Paris, because I mean, of course, you're starting with an 0-5 record. You're the 12th seed in the league, and then you immediately have to play Optic or Seattle. That doesn't seem very fun to me, but that's the hand that they're dealt. So you think that Optic will be in here in this match? I think that Seattle will be. I'll go first. I think that Seattle is going to beat Paris, and that's not really much of a. There wasn't much thought behind that. Just it seems pretty obvious at the moment. But between Optic and Paris, who do you have?
I would go with Optic. I think
Yeah.
whoever loses the Optic Texas match should win this one against Paris pretty convincingly.
Yeah. We'll move on. We got the last two first round losers bracket matches. The Minnesota Rocker will play the loser of the London Royal Ravens and Los Angeles Gorillas. I have LAG down here. You have London. I think that LAG. I think, man, that's tough. I think the LAG and Minnesota are pretty similar. I'll go with LAG because I feel like I have to pick them on at least one match in a bracket. So I'll say that the Gorillas beat the Minnesota Rocker. With London versus Minnesota, who do you have?
This is one I'm kind of on the fence about, to be honest.
Yeah.
We did see. Did we see both of? No, I don't think. No, we did see Minnesota versus London. I'm pretty sure.
All these matches
Yep,
are blending
Minnesota.
together.
Minnesota versus London. London won 3-1. Minnesota only won the control. And then on the other hand, we did see LAG play Minnesota, and Minnesota took that one 3-2. So we have seen this either way. Whoever loses the winners round matchup, this will be a rematch from the online qualifiers. I'm gonna pick Minnesota over London here. Just stick with my trend of picking against London, and um, we'll most likely not even have London here in this matchup, just because they'll continue to prove me wrong. But I'll stick with it for the storylines, I guess.
The final match of the losers bracket round one. We have the New York Subliners against the loser of Los Angeles Thieves versus the Toronto Ultra. Again, we disagreed on the winners bracket match, so you have the Thieves down here. I have Ultra. I don't think it'll really matter. New York has looked pretty bad so far this season and pretty disjointed, unless they really just get it together and surprise people at the major. I'm going to go with the Thieves beating the Subliners.
Yeah, I think similar to the Paris matchup we just touched on, whoever ends up losing, Thieves Toronto should be able to take care of business here against New York, unless they've had some revelation recently that's fixed their hard point woes, or Hydra comes out and drops a 1.8. I think Thieves slash Toronto should win this one. In my case, it would be the Thieves, so I went Thieves 3-0.
I'm going to, I don't know why I said Thieves. I actually thought Toronto would be in the losers bracket, but my point remains. Let's go back up to the winners bracket. For winners bracket round two, we have Atlanta in either in our predictions, and you think that it'll be Atlanta versus Seattle. So who do you have in that?
Atlanta. Said it enough at this point. Not betting against them. It would be interesting though, because the last time in my scenario we saw Atlanta play Seattle earlier this year, Kickoff Classic, same stadium in Arlington. Seattle was able to get that dub, so maybe they make something happen. I don't know, but gonna stick with FaZe in this hypothetical matchup.
Yeah, I'll stick with FaZe as well over Optic. But I'm very excited for that, and I'm very open to being wrong about that. And I think the Green Wall would be very excited about me being wrong on that as well. The other winners bracket round two match would be, in my scenario, it would be London versus the Los Angeles Thieves, and in your scenario, it would be the Los Angeles Gorillas versus the Toronto Ultra. So LAG versus Toronto. Who do you have?
I'd go with Toronto there. I think it would come down to again, just how the teams are looking in their initial matchups. Like, there is that world where Toronto continues to struggle and doesn't even get here, and it's pretty irrelevant. But just uh, based on that chemistry they already have, and what we've seen from them in the past on LAN, I think this team will get it together. And then if they get to this point, I think they should be able to beat LAG.
Yeah, I
Or
have. Or what were you saying?
I was just gonna say, even if London were to beat LAG, if it was Toronto versus London, I would probably still go Toronto there. That would be a cool matchup storyline wise because it'd be like the two London or British teams, even though, not
Yeah.
Toronto isn't technically a British team, but they are a British team. So yeah, would be interesting.
Well, technically European. I don't know if the
European, sorry.
You're really offending all of our Danish fans. I'm gonna go with so my matchup would be London versus LAT. I'm gonna go with LAT. I mean, it's a pretty close matchup. Both of these teams are 4-1 coming in, and obviously, if they're here, they would be both coming in off of victories in round one. I don't know, like it's the same old story. I don't feel confident in London and picking them a lot of times, so I'll go with LAT, which would make the winners bracket FaZe versus LAT, and you have FaZe versus the Ultra. So let's just finish off the winners bracket while we're here. So Atlanta versus Toronto. This would be a rematch of the CDL Championship Grand Finals from last year. Who do you pick between Atlanta and Toronto?
Atlanta. Full steam ahead.
That is shocking. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Atlanta as well over LAT.
It is worth mentioning just to bring it up in case that's a potential matchup. We did see Atlanta play LA Thieves in the online qualifiers. I believe it was the Thieves' first matchup. It would have been FaZe's second because FaZe played Paris, and that's where like Paris won 2 of their 5 maps. But this would have been Thieves' first match of the online qualifiers, and Atlanta took that one 3-1. The Thieves won hardpoint on Tuscan 250 to 248 in that matchup, and then Atlanta took the next 3 maps.
Yeah, that for me, like, I think it gets boring sometimes when we talk about Atlanta, but it's just like we're not going to pick against them, and there's really no reason to spend too much time on it. But maybe our opinions will change as this major progresses, because if Boston gives Atlanta a fight and Optic absolutely smokes Seattle, or Seattle smokes Optic, I mean, I might be open to an upset in round 2, and the same goes for this winners final. If Atlanta, they squeak by Boston or Optic or Seattle, and then Toronto or LAT or probably even London, since you're picking against them, London just steamrolls through everybody. Like I think both of us would be at least a little hesitant to just put Atlanta over the top and say, yeah, they'll win no matter what. But at the moment when we're thinking about these scenarios, we're just thinking about like, okay, Atlanta wins this one, Atlanta wins this one. Like, there's really no reason to get off of that train of thought.
Yep.
The losers bracket. So, correct me if I'm wrong on these. So you had Boston beating Florida, and then so Boston would be in round 2 against Optic. So Boston and Optic, who do you have in that matchup?
I think do you have your bracket pulled up?
I can.
Like,
give me a sec.
well, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying I think we just rapid fire through this loser bracket because it's going to be super different than what
you
we
could
have.
just give me like your losers bracket finals essentially, because
I'm saying like I'll just run through it real quick based on what I picked.
Yeah, just go through it.
So I had Boston over Florida and then Optic over Paris. I have Optic over Boston here. That is another match we saw recently in the non-qualifiers. So not much to explain there. And, Optic in my scenario would be trying to bounce back from the first round loss with the fans behind them, all that, yada, yada. I would pick Optic there. On the other lower part of the bracket, I would have Minnesota versus the Thieves. I went with the Thieves. Then I would have Optic versus LAG. I pick Optic there. The other side would be Thieves versus Seattle, and that's a really exciting one if it actually were to happen. I think that would have a lot of potential to be a really good series. And in this scenario, I went with Thieves 3-2 to set up the storyline of Optic versus Thieves in the losers round 4, so the loser semis. And then I went Optic 3-2 there. And I also went Optic 3-2 over Toronto in the losers finals to set up the Optic dream run to the finals against FaZe.
Yeah, that's a good bracket. I know our brackets never end up the way that we predict it. I think I don't even know when it was, but basically we got every like
We did it for champs.
yeah, and we got pretty much every one of those matches wrong except like the Atlanta matches essentially, and maybe the Toronto ones, but yeah, these are just super difficult and sometimes complicated because like teams just get really hot at certain points and it's kind of they're kind of unstoppable at that point.
Yep.
So for this second round matchups, so for the round 3 and round 4, so how's it working again? I have to be explained this literally every time we do a bracket, but so is basically, are they flipping in round 3 or round 4?
In round 3, it goes. So in my scenario, Seattle, who would have been in round 2,
Yeah.
lost a phase, dropped down to face the Thieves for me in the lower part of round 3.
Okay.
So that would be most likely Toronto for you.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I wrote down the round 2 ones. So Florida and Seattle would be my losers bracket round 2 matchups. I'm gonna pick Seattle. Really pretty self-explanatory. And then the other one would be LAG versus Toronto. I would pick Toronto in that scenario. So that would make it Optic versus Toronto in the losers bracket, and I would pick Optic. That would be a really great match to watch as well. But I would think that Optic would beat Toronto, and in the other match it would be, I believe, London against against Seattle, and I mean that's an interesting matchup, but I'm gonna go with London. Even though, yeah, I'm gonna go with London, but I'm not super confident on that one. And then that would make it London versus Optic, and I'll pick Optic in that. And then the losers bracket would be the LA Thieves versus Optic. So what it was the HBR Classic that we coined it last year. The HBR Classic between LAT and Optic. I would pick Optic. I think that at this point, if they're able to beat Seattle in the first round of the winners bracket, and then go down to the losers bracket and beat like a few teams like Toronto, uh, I I would feel pretty confident in picking Optic at that point. So I'll say Optic beats LAT and goes to the grand finals, which would be as you could probably you probably hope it will be if you're like 80% of the COD community, it'll be Optic versus Atlanta FaZe in the grand finals of the first major with a likely pro Optic crowd, considering it's in Arlington and Optic is hosting the tournament. Um, I mean, no shocker though. I'm gonna pick Atlanta in the grand finals. Like I'm not gonna beat around the bush and try to like give a huge explanation about it. It's just Atlanta is good. That's basically why.
yeah, and I try to be different than you for the sake of the show and for the
Yeah.
sake of predictions, and I think I did a good job of that in the other matchups
I
and
think
earlier
we
in the bracket.
disagreed quite a bit about the winners bracket specifically.
Yeah, but not going to disagree here in the finals. I don't care about the sake of the podcast for this one. I think it's okay if we both pick FaZe to win this first tournament, so that's who I'm going with.
Well, we both picked FaZe, I think, for like 5 consecutive tournaments so far on this podcast. Maybe there was one major last year where we picked Toronto or something, but I don't see why we would have picked against Atlanta in any of the tournaments.
You might be right.
Because like they won all but I think one major last year and then one champs, and
Well,
what they lost. Who?
stage 2 and stage 5.
Yeah, it was Minnesota, right? They
Yeah.
Yeah, so but we still picked them. Like we had no idea that Minnesota would win. So I think there might have been one major so far since this podcast started that we might not have picked Atlanta, but there's still a good chance that we did. I might have picked Toronto. I don't remember. I can't remember what I
I'm
had for breakfast yesterday. How would I remember who I picked
I'm
a year
thinking
ago?
I'm thinking the only time we might have picked someone different would have been the stage 1 major last year. We might have picked
Yeah.
Dallas or maybe even Optic. Um, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. But yeah, that's our predictions. We kind of sped through it, but at the end of the day, like these a lot of these losers bracket matches as we're predicting them will not happen like what we're thinking, because I mean, in Bink's scenario, it's very likely that London completely ruins his bracket, and for me, it's very likely like Toronto will ruin my bracket or Seattle or something like that. So, we don't really know what's going to happen. Maybe Boston will ruin our bracket, and they'll beat Atlanta, and they'll completely make our entire preview useless. But
That'd be
um,
good talking points for next episode, though.
yeah, I think a lot of people would be interested in how we explain Boston beating Atlanta. But yeah, that's our Optic Major 1 preview. Again, it starts on Thursday, March 3rd. So I think all of these other weekends have started on Friday. So starting a day earlier this week, it feels like last season where everything was Thursday through Sunday, which feels a little more normal, to be honest. But yeah, so starts on Thursday, March 3rd. I believe every single day the matches start at around 3 p.m. Eastern, so 12 p.m. Pacific. Um, yeah, I think that's about it for the bracket. We still have some things to go through, but any final thoughts as we close out of the major and like our preview and stuff?
Nope. Nothing in particular I can think of. I think it's just gonna be a really exciting weekend of Call of Duty. Like I mentioned earlier, and when we were going through our predictions, I think the best way to keep up with what we're thinking about as the matches happen is follow us on Twitter, and we'll try to tweet out our predictions for the actual matchups instead of all these hypotheticals where we're predicting matchups that might not even happen at the end of the day. So, um, regardless of brackets and predictions, it's just got a lot of Call of Duty action to look forward to over the next couple of days.
Yeah. Basically, I just needed to throw to you to get out of that screen so I could, look for this community update thing. Because there is a new CDL community update coming. The CDL general manager, Daniel Say, is, I believe, how you say it. He is planning another community update, which, if you missed the first one, was essentially confirming or at least addressing some of the major issues that the competitive community was facing at the time. He In that first community update, he teased that more information was coming on ranked play, and ranked play has since arrived in Call of Duty Vanguard. And I mean, players seem to be liking it for the most part, especially since Sledgehammer has been pretty open about making changes to like how people are leaving and how they're punished and whatnot. So that was a part of the first community update. I don't know if anything was really teased for the second one in particular, but I would imagine possibly talking about like maybe like a, I don't know, like new maps or something. I don't know exactly what would be coming in this second community update, but what do you think about, and what do you think should be addressed? Maybe that wasn't addressed so much last time, or what you think still needs addressed in the CDL and COD Esports?
I think there's a lot of things still that need to be discussed just overall that probably won't be touched on throughout this community update. But um, for one, there's just been a lot of complaints about Vanguard in general, and one of the things that comes to mind is like the pros who've been like sweeping their reticle across their screen to try to pick up like auto aim, and I know like Gunless has been kind of vocal about like a loss of auto aim, and I've seen it's like an issue on the Trello board. Just like auto aim loss in general is like something that Sledgehammer is looking into in Vanguard. So that's just one example. I don't know if that's something that will be addressed. But like a big problem like that is something that you would want to see addressed in a community update like that. But it's just it remains to be seen if it actually will be. Um, I think, like just like a statement, I guess, or just touching on ranked play is probably something you can safely assume will happen in this. If I had to guess, there's been complaints in that too. Um, People like leaving before the game actually starts. Like they'll dashboard and then your team will be 3v4, and it's cool that it doesn't allow the match to start if someone does leave before it starts. But on the other hand, it starts a 60-second timer, and you just literally sit there for a full minute. And when the clock hits 0, like it just kicks you out of the game, and you don't lose points or anything, but it literally wastes a minute of you just sitting there. That's just one thing that comes to mind. There have been issues with like the SR gain and stuff. There have been games for me personally where like uh, I win and I pop off personally and I get +7 SR, and then there'll be games where I lose and I'll lose 50 just like right away. So I don't know exactly what's going on with that, and that's just like a personal thing that I've experienced. I know other people have uh, been vocal about just ranked play in general. So I think that's a safe topic to assume will be in the update. And you did say, new maps and stuff. I don't know if they would bring it up before this one because obviously they're not going to make changes to the map pool for the major, but they definitely could next week before we get into the, not stage 2, but the major 2 qualifiers. Um, Casablanca is one of the new maps added with season 2 of Vanguard, and it's been played. Is being played on GB right now for Search and Destroy, and I'm still trying to figure out the map myself a little bit. I haven't played it too much, but I played it a couple times, and I don't hate it. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm still trying to figure it out. So I don't know how competitively viable it is. I think Trem seems to at least think it would be a decent map. That's a head Ego Chall correspondent, Justin Limoges, for those of you who don't know, for whatever reason. But Casablanca could be an option if they were to add a new map. So maybe that's something they'll touch on. I don't really know. And other than that, I think we'll have to wait and see. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the if you go to the CDL YouTube channel, that's how people are talking about the community update. It's like I forget how you. It's basically they're waiting for a YouTube premiere. So at March 2nd, so that's Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, is when this video will premiere and the community update will go live. And in the description on the YouTube channel, it says, join Daniel Say, the general manager of Call of Duty League, as he responds to questions from around the community and takes you through CDL season updates, talks of including new maps for the league, rookies entering this season, and much more. So, I mean, it doesn't give like a whole lot of detail, obviously, but the fact that they're even like open to the maps coming in, Sledgehammer's been a lot more open about like maps during the middle of the season being added to the pool, and definitely it's needed for control. I'm really tired of seeing the same 2 control maps, so just having a third option would be nice. And yeah. So also, I wonder if we could be seeing the confirmation of I believe there was like one major, right, that was not confirmed, like the location and whatnot. Wasn't that Minnesota? The CDL initially announced that Minnesota would host a major, and then the Rocker came out and said, like, we're really pleased that the CDL has chosen us to host this, but we still have to confirm our venue location or whatever. So I believe it was Minnesota that was involved, but it would be interesting to just have like a plan in place for the next like month or two, or preferably the entire season, about where these majors are, so people and the fans and everything, they can kind of plan where they're going to be, if they're going to go to Minnesota or LA, for example, and attend an event. Like having months in advance to plan something like that out would be great for those fans.
No, we know. Minnesota tweeted on February 23rd. Update, we
Okay.
figured it out, and they confirmed that Major 2 will be at Mystic Lake. I'm assuming that's
Sweet.
place in Minnesota.
Yeah, I
And
completely
that
missed
was
that.
the one you were thinking of. Um, at least I believe so. And then I think stage 3. I don't want to say the stages. Major 3 is supposed to be in Toronto, and then Major 4 is supposed to be in New York.
All right, sweet. Yeah, I completely missed that. I didn't see Minnesota's tweet about that. So I have no idea what they'll talk about in this community update other than like I don't really know how much they'll talk about rookies joining the league. Like, I mean, unless there's an incentive for these teams to start signing academy teams like Toronto and Minnesota have started doing. Um, I don't really know what they could be discussing at length about rookies coming into the CDL.
Yeah, that might just be like a highlight thing where they're talking about all the guys we've seen so far. I don't really know. I think you did bring up a good point about control, though. I wasn't thinking about that at the time, but obviously that's like a major issue, only having 2 control maps. So maybe that's something. I mean, I hope that's something they touch on if they're going to be talking about new maps, because that definitely needs to be addressed moving forward.
One last thing before we go, since I mentioned it, Minnesota and Toronto have signed academy rosters. Did we talk about the Minnesota one last time? Them signing the Spanish team?
I don't think we did.
I can't remember when this actually was because it feels like a really long time ago, but I know I wrote this article and these articles just like they completely slipped my mind after I write them. So
Minnesota was on February 14th.
yeah, so I guess we just skipped it on the last episode. But yeah, Minnesota they signed an all Spanish academy team, which is interesting, but like not super surprising considering this team is essentially like the best European challengers team. They've pretty much dominated challengers in Europe so far for these like online cups and whatnot. So they announced that they have signed a Spanish team. And Toronto, they actually signed 2 academy rosters. One is a European challengers team, and one is a North American challengers team. The North American team includes Hixie, which is their substitute, Mohawk, who is Canadian, Scrappy, and Vickle, a Spanish guy. I have no idea who he is, but he's on the North American challengers team. And then this European Academy team is Beans, Furious, Harry, and Vortex. So, I mean, obviously we're both familiar with Harry and Vortex. So this is a British team, 3 Englishmen and a Scotsman. So chip chip cheerio. That's a nice. It's nice that they're actually doing this and like dedicating themselves to challengers because pretty much none of the Call of Duty League teams had a challengers team at this point. Maybe Atlanta. Do they still have their academy roster?
No.
So yeah, so I think nobody had an academy roster as far as I know, because the Subliners had one last year. You know, Toronto had one like 2 years ago, but they really couldn't do anything. And then Atlanta had one last year. So I think these are the only 3 technically challengers teams being sponsored by CDL teams, but that's a great trend. I hope it continues.
Yeah, that's something we've touched on. I know I've talked about at length in the podcast before is just the challengers ecosystem as a whole. And, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. I just think that long term for the success of the CDL for many, many years to come, I think we eventually need to get to the point where all of these franchises have their set academy teams, and they have like an academy league, a challengers league specifically with those teams. And there could be like the open challenger circuit or whatever for the other teams who aren't actually in the like quote unquote academy CDL teams or whatever. But I just think that's like something down the road that hopefully we get to, and this is a good start to that.
Of course. I hope that happens as well. It'd be great to see a bunch of different teams in challengers that are able to make money and compete at the highest level that they're able to. Before we get out of here, I should remind you of our prediction scores, since our predictions may be kind of weird and might be really bad this weekend for the winners bracket and the entire bracket. Like Bink said at the beginning of the show, what we're going to try to do is go day by day. So we gave you like our actual predictions like for an entire bracket without seeing how teams play, but every day of the event, we're going to tweet out at Ego Chall Podcast on Twitter. We're going to tweet out on that account about who we think will win that day's matches, and then that's what will contribute to our total prediction scores, which at the moment you are currently leading. You have a record of 20-10 in your predictions, and I have a record of 16-14 because I had a horrific first week that I have not yet recovered from. So yeah, so you're leading right now, but maybe if you just completely bomb in the bracket, I'll be ahead after when we reconvene next week. That would be nice.
Yep.
Yeah, so that basically does it. We've gone a little over an hour so far. It's kind of a sweet spot that we're trying to get. Make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those different platforms. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. He's at JBink with 2 Ks. I'm at Pres Byers. And as I said, the Twitter account is at Ego Chall Podcast. Follow it for updates on when we're doing the next show, which we hope to be doing next Tuesday, March 8th, here on twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. But if there's any changes to when we're doing the show, or if you want to follow us for the predictions throughout the major, or maybe some memes when I feel like making memes on that account. But yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. Again, next show scheduled for March 8th, which we'll likely be doing to be covering what has happened this coming weekend. What happened, who won, were we right that Atlanta FaZe won, or did the Paris Legion shock the world? Who knows? But yeah, that does it for me. Bank, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys as always for tuning in. Like Preston said, we've been trying to hit the sweet spot of an hour here. I think next week, just due to the scheduling for the CDL, next week's show will likely be a behemoth because we'll have the major to go over, which, obviously will be a lot of matches, but then we'll also, there isn't a week off between this major and the start of the online matches, so we'll also have to touch on the upcoming online matches almost immediately after. So we're going to have a lot to talk about next show, obviously, and I hope you guys will tune in again. So thank you guys, as always, and remember to send the chow.